Well, we've been talking Dak Prescott. Well, we're always talking about Dak Prescott, but even more so the last few days. And the Cowboys and Dak did not come to an agreement for a long-term contract, so he'll play 1 year, 31.4, and then they'll revisit this after the season. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show on ESPN 105.9 The Zone. The SEC Insider Hit this morning is brought to you by your next John Deere tractor or John Deere lawnmower at Mississippi Ag, 16 locations. You can visit agup.com, find the retail location nearest you. The two in the metro area, Canton and Pearl, Mississippi Ag, agup.com. We welcome in Steve Palazzolo, ProFootballFocus.com. Steve joins us on the Miller Lite guest line. So, Steve, Dak is will be only the third quarterback to play under the franchise tag. And what does this, in your opinion, what does this mean for Dak and the Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously an interesting situation. I think when you look at the fact that Dallas signed a whole bunch of other players, right? You know, the fact that they've gone a little out of order. Most teams, they lock up their quarterback and then you stack a running back and a wide receiver and a cornerback or whatever else it might be. On top of that, the fact that Dallas has gone out of order, I think, speaks to a couple things. The fact that Dak's really good. I mean, he's a good player, and I've been on here many times saying, look, he's good. He's maybe not as good as, your fans might think, but he's probably not as bad as people think he is nationally. Like, he's a good player that can lead a high-end offense like he did last year. I think the question is, because he's been a little up and down in his 4 years, is Dallas a little wary about locking him up? And is Dak saying, I'm just going to hold strong, much like Kirk Cousins did and some other players through the years, not what Mahomes did. Mahomes went ahead and said, okay, you guys are going to pay me a ton of money up front. Maybe I'm not maximizing every dollar, but I'm going to take that long-term deal and security. Dak looks like he's trying to maximize every dollar, much like a Kirk Cousins. So it's an interesting dynamic where I think Dallas is a little bit in that, Dak's not really a top 10 guy, but he's capable. And Dak's saying, look, I've played top 10 football. I want to be paid like it. And I think that's how we are where we are now with the franchise tag.
If you take the 4 seasons as a whole, has he played like a top 10 QB?
He's right on the outside looking in. And I use that, I'm going to use air quotes around the top 10 because I think, over the last decade or so, if you were to list the top 10 quarterbacks, I think they'd be fairly obvious. No matter what numbers you use, you start with Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, Peyton when he was healthy. You get into that tier of Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck when he was healthy, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger. I'm forgetting some guys there too, but you kind of get there. Now there's obviously turnover with that list. Some of those guys are getting older, and I think that puts Dak probably with, say, Carson Wentz and a couple other guys, Matthew Stafford type, right around 10, 10 to 12, I think, in the current NFL landscape moving forward. So, my thoughts on quarterback is if you're getting a guy that's top 8 or top 10, those are the types of guys you want to lock up. I think after that, it does get a little bit more variable. The question for Dak, though, using, again, top 10 as a proxy here, in our PFF grades, he's been top 10 twice. That was his rookie season and then last year, but the other seasons he was closer to 20. 18th, 19th, 20th in our rankings, both in 2017 and 18. So I think that's where you have some reservations if you're the Cowboys. We've seen Dak be elevated by Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup's development last year. So trying to sift through how much of that is the quarterback, how much of that is the play caller and the playmakers, I think is challenging.
Well, now that he's 4 years in, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you have 10 being the best? What number would you give Jason Garrett?
Jason Garrett? Oh, man.
As a head coach?
Middle of the pack.
Okay.
Like a 5. I mean, I know a lot of people didn't like Jason Garrett and a lot of stuff that happened with Dallas, but the same thing happened with Mike McCarthy, in Green Bay. So Mike McCarthy's taken over, and he didn't get completely run out of Green Bay, but Green Bay soured on him, a guy that was a good coach earlier in his career. And then, maybe things got stale. That was the complaint, but how much of it was actually Aaron Rodgers? So I think the coach perception isn't always as extreme as people think. And I think when you have a guy like Jason Garrett or even a Mike McCarthy who have had, pretty good success, more success than not, it's hard to put them above, say, like the middle tier of coaches at least.
Okay, so was it an upgrade or was it a push?
I think there's a chance for an upgrade. I think McCarthy has done a good job, and not just because, he came by our offices and I could actually speak to him and talk to him and say, and hear him say, hey, look, I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to improve every last process now that I have this 1 year off, with the intention of coming back as he is here in 2020. So I think the mentality's in the right place. We'll see how that actually works. But I think surrounding himself with a Kellen Moore, keeping him as offensive coordinator, having a John Kitna, having the supporting cast for a coach, I think is huge. You're the CEO. You want to surround yourself with good people. I think that's crucial. And I think that's the right way to go for McCarthy. So I think it'll be an upgrade. I think it'll be an upgrade all around for Dallas. They were a team that played pretty well last year and underachieved, though, from a record and a little bit of a luck standpoint, I would say, as far as their record went last season.
Steve Palazzolo, ProFootballFocus.com on the Miller Lite guest line, talking Dak and the Cowboys. No long-term deal. Dak will play a 1 year on $31.4 million. And we'll see what shakes out from there. So do you think that Dak can get just a little bit better to make a difference in his career? I mean, does he have a little bit more runway? And with McCarthy, Kellen Moore, who's still trying to figure it out and who's incredibly young, and Dak's only 25. So can he take another step, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. So, when you look back, I think a lot of us, especially Blake, I see Blake probably as a big Madden player, right? Like, I think a lot of people, So
if you ever want a ball, just let me know.
A lot of people in our generation know Madden, and it's like, all right, here's this guy as a rookie. He starts out as a 70, and then he's a 74, and he just gets better every single year. That's not the reality of the NFL. Guys don't just get better every single season. But I think when you look at a guy like Dak, I think Wentz is in this boat, and you go back and look at that body of work from 4 years. There are some peaks, there are some valleys, but overall it's been more good than bad. I think when you have that guy, then going forward, you could say, okay, I can expect this guy to be in the top half of quarterbacks, maybe a top 10 quarterback, which means in any given year, this guy's going to look like a top 5 guy, or play like a top 5 guy, or produce like a top 5 guy. So I think that's where Dak, you have to be encouraged. There's been way more good than bad. He has the rushing ability that I think you can just kind of tack onto that with a little bit of creativity in the red zone. You're going to add some value there.
Which, hold on, I don't think that Garrett and his offensive staff leveraged that ability the way they should have, Steve.
Well, they did it. I mean, even just, coming out of Mississippi State, you look at him and it's like, all right, he's like a high-end Tebow, you don't want to, it's not a knock, but, they used him so much in the design running game in college, and he was really good at it. You kind of expected that to be a part, like Cam Newton. It's a big part of his game in Carolina, big guy that can handle and take hits. And yeah, you're right. They just haven't done that. They flashed it at times. If you've got him and Zeke in the backfield and you just change the box count a little bit, that's huge, So I think there's more to tap into there. Here's the one number that I think concerned me a little bit was we did a little study on what happens when quarterbacks drop back 40-plus times in a game. Not just their record, but their actual performance. Dak was actually among the worst in the NFL. And it's not a perfect stat, but it's just like, hey, when you put the ball in his hands, sometimes it's comeback situations, but you put the ball in this guy's hands, usually the best quarterbacks rise to the top. Those same names, Tom Brady by far was the best guy at having high-end games when he had the ball 40 times, plus as far as dropbacks go. Dak was one of the worst. He only had one game above 70 PFF grade, which is not good. So that would be like my one concern. Has he been protected just a little bit through the years with the run game, with play action, with all these other things? When you're paying that guy, you want him to be the guy where if the game plan dictates it, you say, forget Zeke, Dak's our guy, go throw the ball 40, 45 times and win it for us. We just haven't seen that from Dak throughout his career. That'd be like the one little reservation that I had, I think, as far as, buying into him as the guy at quarterback.
But have they allowed him to do that? Have they ripped the Band-Aid off?
Not enough. I mean, even since his rookie season, I felt like that was the one thing that was lacking. I think he's capable. I mean, he's got short area accuracy and intermediate throws, the rushing ability that we said. Like, he has enough tools in the toolbox to be efficient. But, when those games have come up, he hasn't performed all that well outside of a handful. So, yeah, I think that you haven't seen it a ton, but, it's a little concerning that he is he really does rank among the worst in the league as far as that particular metric goes.
And he's obviously either the most scrutinized or one of the most scrutinized players because he plays for Dallas. You agree or disagree?
No, I definitely agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of things at play, right? I mean, Tony Romo was an outstanding quarterback. He was a top 10 guy for the majority of his career, but because he was in Dallas and, if you don't win games, it just people think you're not clutch or whatever it is. Plus he had a couple, rough moments in the playoffs here and there. But I think that the fact that Dak was a 4th round pick kind of came out of nowhere. And I think you always have that stigma just a little bit because all of 2016, his rookie season, it was like, okay, he had a good preseason. Let's see it during the year. Then he does well during the year. And it's like, all right, are the wheels going to fall off in week 6, in week 8, in week 10? And they never really did his rookie season. I was guilty as well because a lot of times you go back and it's like, hey, I didn't really see this in college. I'm seeing a completely different guy here in the pros. I think that would be a fair assessment with Dak. He showed flashes in college, but he was far more consistent once he hit the NFL. So I think that also is part of the scrutiny. Being in Dallas, being a 4th round pick, and then, exceeding expectations early, but also, tapering off in years 2 and 3. So it really depends on where your perspective is on Dak, if you were higher on him originally or lower originally.
Fair enough. Steve Palazzolo, NFL Insider, ProFootballFocus.com on the Out of Bounds show. Outside of Mahomes, Russell, and Lamar, I'm just assuming you're sold on Lamar. You may not be. Outside of those 3, who's the next star? Is it Deshaun? Is it someone? Where would you go?
Yeah, I think I look at Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Jackson's been in the news. Deshaun Watson, I think, as far as what he's done in Houston behind a poor offensive line, I think he's helped elevate that roster. They haven't done a great job of building around him. They've had those couple pieces with DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller. He's done well with that. But I think Watson has that ability to elevate his roster. And I think Dak and Wentz are kind of like in that tier where you just need the right supporting cast. That's been the story of their career. I think when you look at that entire draft class of 2016, Dak, Wentz, and Goff, in PFF grades, all 3 of them have had the best year at one point. Dak twice, 2016 and last year. Goff was the top guy when they went to the Super Bowl in 2018, and Wentz was the top guy in 2017 when he had that MVP caliber type of season. I think that sums up today's NFL more than anything. Mahomes is a star. Wilson's a star. Lamar looks like he's there. Watson could be there. I'm not sure there are other guys that are locked in those spots. I think they're very dependent on what happens around them, probably more than, say, a Mahomes or a Wilson would be. And I think that's what's going to kind of dictate the parity of the NFL in these coming years as Brady and Breeze and a lot of the older guys, start to fall off and retire.
Okay, let's go to Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa. Then, so we have another analytics guy by the name of Dave Bartu that comes on the show, and he said that blue blood quarterbacks, he wouldn't take them. He would not take them early in the NFL draft. They don't have to elevate their teams. The table is set for them week in, week out. The 12-ounce filet is right there and cooked perfectly, and the bourbon and wine, is the best of the best. Everything is set up. Now, if you go through the starters in the NFL, that's kind of the way it is. There's not that many from blue blood programs. Do you buy into that? What do you think on that?
I think it's an interesting take. I've seen some of Dave's work on that type of stuff, and I think it's really no matter what you're using to project quarterbacks, you're not going to be great at it. Nobody, whether it's Dave's work, stuff that we do with our grades, like we found a lot of things that translate at the next level, but it translates enough that you could point to good quarterbacks, say 60% of the time. So I'm just picking a number out. Like nobody's going to be sitting there at 90%. So I think when you kind of combine all those methods, it helps. I think that example is definitely a good one, because you wouldn't go back and say, well, I need to draft Matt Barkley and I need to draft Matt Stafford, Mark Sanchez, and you just grab all the USC quarterbacks over and over again just because they perform well every year. Matt Leinart, because there are other things at play. I think using the PFF system, we're able to kind of isolate what did Joe Burrow do outside of his playmakers? What did Tua do outside of his playmakers? And I think those are two examples of, these are guys that do have the NFL ability, whether it's accuracy and pocket presence, ability to make plays inside and outside the pocket. So I think every case is an individual case. I would say, I think Dave's method, that idea though, has done a good job of maybe finding the Patrick Mahomes of the world and the Dak Prescotts of the world and saying, look, this team just looked better with maybe a subpar supporting cast or in a tough situation. Dak being in the SEC West, Mahomes playing with zero defense and a nondescript group of playmakers. So I think there are different methods to kind of point you in the right direction of finding quality NFL starting quarterbacks. There's no one method that just, is 100% across the board. And I think when you combine them, I think you end up with some pretty good results.
Okay. Steve Palazzolo on the Out of Bounds show. You can watch the show on YouTube Live, search Out of Bounds Sports. Blake?
Yeah, Steve, one of the big arguments against paying Dak and some of the other quarterbacks is this whole new, well, maybe not that new, but new public idea is that, you got to have a quarterback either on a rookie contract or he's got to be like a top 3 quarterback to be worth paying in order to save your cap and have talent to pay everybody else and yada, yada, yada. Well, without getting too cappy weird, was it worth the Chiefs signing a guy like Chris Jones to such a monster deal as they just signed Patrick Mahomes? I mean, that's well allocated money in your mind, or was that a reach like maybe some of the running back contracts we've seen lately?
Yeah, I love Chris Jones. I think he's a fantastic player. We had him as a top 10 player coming out of that draft. It is too much money, I think, when you combine it with Mahomes plus Frank Clark. I mean, Frank Clark's going to be a $27 million cap hit in the next coming couple of years. So I do think, for Mahomes and the Chiefs to sustain success, it's not going to be through the defensive line. It's going to be on the offense. And I do think Mahomes is one of those guys that can elevate everybody around him. But the caveat there is we haven't actually seen it. He did step into an offense with Andy Reid, with Eric Bieniemy, with Tyreek Hill, with Travis Kelce, a group that actually they brought Alex Smith to be the highest rated passer, for whatever that's worth, in the league in 2017, right before Patrick Mahomes took over. So Mahomes is awesome. He's special. I would never take anything away from him. However, he's been in the best situation in the NFL in his 2 years. So the big question is, okay, what happens when Tyreek loses a step or Travis Kelce gets banged up, as many tight ends do? You need to replenish that group of receivers, those playmakers. To me, that's how you maintain success in the NFL. It's not in the trenches, actually. It's not on the defensive line. You just want to be good enough in the trenches. You want to be outstanding with your playmakers or in the secondary. So I do think it's going to hamstring Kansas City just a little bit. I think they were on the right track with Mahomes. I think adding Jones to the mix is just going to make it really difficult to keep that strong supporting cast for the Chiefs.
So it's almost impossible, because once a guy like that performs, he's going to get paid somewhere, right?
Yeah. But like I think NFL teams have to be comfortable letting star non-quarterbacks walk. I think the difficulty with the NFL in football is if you name a star player, Khalil Mack, Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, these defensive players, everybody just hears star. The same way in baseball you would hear Bryce Harper or Mike Trout and you hear star. But in the NFL, it's just not an equivalent. You have star quarterbacks who are worth like 10 times, 15 times as much as the star defensive player. And I think in football, in any other sport, letting a star player walk hurts your team. In football, letting a star player walk who's not a quarterback does not hurt your team nearly as much as their name value would indicate. Like,
there you go.
Khalil Mack, the Raiders haven't rushed the quarterback well, but losing Khalil Mack is not the reason why they haven't won games over the last couple of years. So I think that's the thing that NFL fans and teams really need to wrap their heads around.
Okay, so bottom line, do you roll your eyes when you hear national radio hosts, TV people get bogged down in whether or not to give Dak $33.5 or $35.5 million? I mean, does that really?
Yeah.
Because of that position. Two, until the pandemic, the cap's going up. This year it's 198.
Right.
Let's just say it's 200 million. I mean, do you roll? What is your reaction when you hear that, Steve?
Until I saw Dak last season, like, he did put up a really good year, and I love that. All the pieces are in place there in Dallas, which makes me – there's a certain comfort level with putting that, paying that money with Dak and knowing you've got him locked up for a few years. I understand the reservations because he's been right on that borderline of, is he top 10? Is he top 15? I get it. But, yeah, I would say you're actually not hamstringing yourself as much as people think as far as the money goes. I also think that wise teams, even if you have a Dak locked up, you're still drafting quarterbacks all the time, just in case you run into another Dak, because having that player on a 4-year contract, a rookie contract, is extremely valuable. But having an average quarterback on that 4-year contract is not really all that valuable. Yeah, so I would say, pay Dak. Don't worry about Zeke. Don't worry about some of those other guys. Pay him first and let everything else fall into place. So, yeah, I think that should have been the way Dallas went.
All right, we'll leave. I've got several. I could go another 10, 12 questions, but we've only got a minute left in the segment. And Steve Palazzolo, ProFootballFocus.com, on the Miller Lite guest line. All right, Steve, as far as we know, we're going to have the NFL, and we're going to play. So we're all crossing our fingers. You still feel like we're full speed ahead and things will eventually work their way out and Goodell and them won't check up?
Yeah, I sure hope so. I mean, I think good decisions need to be made. I think obviously there's a lot at stake, and they're going to do their best to make it happen. We'll see how the landscape changes in the coming weeks, but I think the NFL at least will find a way to make it work.
Cool. Have a good weekend, buddy. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Steve Palazzolo, ProFootballFocus.com. Most people feel like that's the best site in the industry, and they've done some really cool things. Chris Collinsworth, the Blakey Blakesters' favorite color analyst, is one of the owners, investors in ProFootballFocus.com. I like Collinsworth. Blake does not.
I like his slide in. That's pretty good. The Collinsworth slide in at the beginning of every show when Al's like says something to Chris and then they pan the camera and he just slides in on his little chair. It's smooth, man. He's smooth. I give him that. I think he's annoying, but he's smooth.
Wow. Well, Palazzolo's great. That was fun. So he gave you the good and the bad on Dak. Yes. There was praise, and then there was some constructive criticism. And a good 4-year career, they couldn't come to a long-term agreement. Now, I love the debate on how many players you pay outside the quarterback position. Did you hear Palazzolo, Blake? He's like, you don't.
You don't pay nobody.
But don't you notice owners can't help it? Owners and front offices can't help it.
Well, they're fans. They get attached to players.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. The Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, is brought to you by an ice-cold Coors Light on your back patio this afternoon. Hour number 3 coming up.